At 3:20 p.m. on the 10th of April 2009, a tornado warning was already in effect for Rutherford County, Tennessee. The National Weather Service had issued it 10 minutes earlier. At 3:10 p.m., the storm was moving northeast at roughly 40 miles per hour. Residents in the path had little time to react. The warning itself was specific and urgent. A severe thunderstorm capable of producing a tornado was indicated by radar, but the precise track remained uncertain. Within minutes, the first reports of a tornado on the ground began to arrive. It was near the intersection of Interstate 24 and State Route 96, just west of Murfreesboro. The tornado didn't form slowly. It dropped out of the parent supercell with little warning for those directly in its path. By 3:22 p.m., it was already tearing through the western edge of the city. The first structure it struck was a mobile home park. The tornado was rated EF4 on the enhanced Fujita scale, with winds estimated at 170 miles per hour. That kind of wind does not leave a building standing, it removes it. In the mobile home park, several homes were obliterated. The debris field was immediate and chaotic. Emergency dispatchers began receiving multiple calls at the same moment. Some callers were trapped, others were searching for family members. The tornado cut a path roughly 5 miles long and a quarter-mile wide. It crossed Interstate 24 near mile marker 78. Vehicles were tossed from the roadway. One witness reported seeing a pickup truck lifted and spun before being dropped into a ditch. The driver survived but was critically injured. The tornado then moved through residential neighborhoods, subdivisions, and commercial areas. The damage was not uniform. Some homes were completely leveled. Others, just a few hundred feet away, sustained only minor roof damage. That is typical of a high-end tornado, but it made the response more difficult. Search and rescue crews had to treat each block as a separate disaster scene. At 3:30 p.m., the Rutherford County Emergency Management Agency activated its Emergency Operations Center. But the tornado was still on the ground. It passed just north of the Murfreesboro city center, missing the downtown area by less than a mile. That was a matter of chance. If the path had shifted a few hundred yards south, the death toll would have been much higher. The tornado continued northeast, weakening gradually before lifting around 3:45 p.m. near the town of Las Casas. In total, the storm was on the ground for about 25 minutes. In that time, it had destroyed or damaged hundreds of structures. 2 people were killed, dozens were injured. The final count would eventually reach 121 injuries, some critical. The 2 fatalities were a mother and her young son. They were inside a mobile home when the tornado struck. The home was not anchored to a foundation. It was tossed and disintegrated in seconds. The mother and son were found in the debris field several hundred feet away. They were not the only ones in mobile homes that day, but they were the only ones who did not survive. The question that would be asked repeatedly in the aftermath was, why were they not warned earlier? And if they were warned, why did they not seek shelter in time? The National Weather Service had issued the tornado warning at 3:10 p.m. The tornado touched down at approximately 3:20 p.m. That is a lead time of 10 minutes. In meteorological terms, that is considered adequate. The average lead time for tornado warnings in the United States is around 13 minutes, but 10 minutes is not enough for everyone. It is enough for a person in a well-built house to move to a basement or an interior room. It is not enough for a person in a mobile home to drive to a sturdy shelter, especially if the shelter is not nearby. And in much of rural Tennessee, there are no community tornado shelters. The responsibility falls on the individual. The warning was broadcast on NOAA weather radio, local television stations, and through outdoor sirens. The sirens in Murfreesboro are tested regularly. On that afternoon, they activated at 3:12 p.m., 2 minutes after the warning was issued. But sirens are an outdoor warning system. They are designed to alert people who are outside. Inside a mobile home, the sirens can be difficult to hear, especially if the television is on or if the air conditioner is running. The mother and son who died may not have heard the sirens, or they may have heard them but not understood the urgency, or they may have understood but had nowhere to go. That is the uncomfortable truth that emerged from the investigation. The response from emergency management was fast. The search and rescue operation began within minutes of the tornado lifting. Teams from the Murfreesboro Fire Department, the Rutherford County Sheriff's Office, and volunteer firefighters converged on the affected area. The Tennessee National Guard was activated within hours. The American Red Cross set up shelters, but the fatalities could not be undone. The 2 victims became a focal point for a broader discussion about tornado safety in the southeastern United States. The southeastern U.S. is particularly vulnerable to tornadoes. Unlike the Great Plains, where tornadoes are common but the terrain is flat and open, the southeast has hilly terrain, dense forests, and a high population density. Tornadoes in the southeast are often faster-moving and more likely to occur at night. They are also more likely to be rain-wrapped, meaning they are hidden behind a curtain of rain and difficult to see. The April 10th tornado in Murfreesboro was not rain-wrapped, but it formed quickly and moved fast. Many residents reported seeing the tornado only moments before it hit them. The National Weather Service office in Nashville had been tracking the storm for about 30 minutes before the warning was issued. The forecaster on duty saw the radar signature tighten and intensify. A tornado vortex signature appeared on the Doppler radar. That is a clear indicator that a tornado is likely. The decision to issue the warning was made quickly, but there was a delay between the radar indication and the ground report. That delay is normal, but it is also a source of ongoing research. Could the warning have been issued earlier? Possibly by a minute or two, but even an additional 2 minutes may not have saved the mother and son. The problem was not the warning system itself. The problem was the vulnerability of the people it was meant to protect. Mobile homes are not safe in tornadoes. That is a well-known fact. The National Weather Service has a specific recommendation. If you live in a mobile home, you should have a plan to get to a sturdy building or a storm shelter when a tornado warning is issued. But many mobile home residents do not have access to a sturdy building nearby. They may not have a car. They may not have a neighbor who can take them. They may be elderly or disabled. The Murfreesboro tornado exposed this gap between the warning and the ability to act on it. In the days following the tornado, the Federal Emergency Management Agency conducted a damage assessment. The total cost of the damage was estimated at $40 million. Over 300 homes were damaged or destroyed. Over 150 mobile homes were affected. The mobile home park that was hit hardest was called the Emerald Hills Estates. It was a community of mostly low-income residents. Many of them did not have insurance. Some lost everything they owned. The recovery was slow, but the immediate aftermath was also marked by a remarkable response from the community. Neighbors helped neighbors. Strangers showed up with chainsaws and bottled water. Churches opened their doors. The local schools became donation centers. The resilience was real, but it did not change the fact that 2 people were dead and many more were traumatized. Investigators from the National Weather Service later surveyed the damage and confirmed the EF4 rating. The tornado had produced a damage path that was nearly continuous. They found evidence of violent winds in the form of ground scouring and debarking of trees. The debris was thrown in multiple directions, indicating complex wind fields. The tornado was classified as a multiple vortex tornado, meaning it contained smaller subvortices rotating around the main circulation. That explains the erratic damage patterns. One house could be completely destroyed while the house next door was barely touched. What happened in Murfreesboro that day was not a failure of meteorology. The storm was predicted, the warning was issued, but the warning did not reach everyone, and even when it did not always translate into safety. The question that remains is not just about the tornado itself. It is about the systems we rely on to protect people from disasters that are predictable but not preventable. The tornado will happen again. The question is whether the next one will be different. At 3:12 p.m. on the afternoon of April 10, 2009, the outdoor warning sirens in Murfreesboro began to sound. The tone was steady, not wavering, a signal that a tornado warning had been issued by the National Weather Service in Nashville. The warning had been broadcast exactly 2 minutes earlier. At 3:10 p.m. the sirens were the second layer of notification. By that point, the storm responsible for the warning was already displaying a pronounced hook echo on radar, a classic signature of a rotating thunderstorm capable of producing a tornado. The hook echo had been visible for several minutes before the warning was issued, but forecasters had waited for additional confirmation. That confirmation came from a spotter report of funnel clouds near the town of College Grove, just southwest of Murfreesboro. The warning was then transmitted. The supercell that spawned the tornado had formed along a cold front that was sweeping across Middle Tennessee that afternoon. The atmospheric conditions had been primed for severe weather for days. A strong low-pressure system was moving east from the Mississippi River Valley. Warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico was being pulled northward, colliding with cooler, drier air from the plains. That combination created a highly unstable atmosphere. The Storm Prediction Center in Norman, Oklahoma had issued a moderate risk for severe thunderstorms across much of central Tennessee on the morning of April 10th. They had highlighted the potential for tornadoes, some of which could be strong. The forecast was accurate. The first thunderstorms developed around 1:30 p.m. near the Tennessee River. They intensified quickly. By 2 p.m., the cells were producing large hail and damaging wind. One cell in particular, located northwest of Murfreesboro, began to rotate. The rotation became evident on Doppler radar at approximately 2:45 p.m. The storm's updraft was strong enough to tilt the rotating column of air, a process known as mesocyclone formation. At 2:52 p.m., the National Weather Service issued a severe thunderstorm warning for that cell. They noted the possibility of a tornado but held off on a full tornado warning. The decision was based on the fact that the rotation was still elevated, not yet reaching the ground. But at 3:04 p.m., a spotter near the town of Christiana reported a funnel cloud. The National Weather Service immediately escalated. At 3:10 p.m., the tornado warning was issued for western Rutherford County. The warning area included Murfreesboro, the largest city in that part of the state. The warning was specific. A tornado had been spotted and it was moving northeast at 40 miles per hour. Residents were urged to take shelter immediately. The warning was disseminated through multiple channels: NOAA weather radio, local television stations that broke into regular programming, and the outdoor sirens. But the sirens were not designed to be heard indoors, especially in tightly sealed mobile homes. The tornado touched down at approximately 3:20 p.m. just south of the town of Eagleville. The exact time is based on radar analysis and damage surveys. The first structures struck were farmhouses and outbuildings in a rural area. The damage was initially rated EPHON with winds estimated at 100 miles per hour, but as the tornado moved northeast, it intensified. The damage path became wider and more severe. By the time it reached the Almaville Road area, the tornado had strengthened to EF3 intensity with winds of 150 miles per hour. Homes were completely destroyed. Vehicles were thrown, trees were debarked and stripped of their leaves. The National Weather Service office in Nashville was monitoring the storm in real time. The lead forecaster, a meteorologist named John Schmidt, later described the radar display as one of the most impressive he had seen in his career. The tornado was producing a debris ball, a signature that appears when the radar beam reflects off airborne debris. That indicated that the tornado was on the ground and was lifting heavy objects. The debris ball was first detected at 3:25 p.m., about 5 minutes after the reported touchdown. It was a clear sign that the tornado was violent and that the damage would be extensive. As the storm continued northeast, it passed over a series of subdivisions and mobile home parks. The most devastating impact occurred at the Emerald Hills Estates, a mobile home community located along State Route 96. The tornado struck the park at approximately 3:35 p.m. At that point, the tornado was at its peak intensity, with winds estimated at 170 miles per hour. The mobile homes in the park were not anchored to permanent foundations. The National Weather Service would later note that many of the homes were tied down only with straps or simple blocks. When the tornado hit, the homes were lifted off their supports and disintegrated. One resident, a man named James Miller, later recalled hearing a sound like a freight train, then nothing but silence. He had taken shelter in a bathtub which remained intact. Others were not so fortunate. The two fatalities occurred in a single mobile home at the far end of the park. The mother, 32-year-old Tina Holloway, and her 5-year-old son, Marcus, were inside when the tornado struck. The home was completely destroyed. The bodies were found in a field approximately 300 feet away. The investigation later concluded that the mother had likely tried to take cover in the bathroom, but the bathroom was not a safe location. The walls were not reinforced. The roof was ripped off and the interior was exposed to the full force of the wind. The deaths were instantaneous. Emergency responders arrived at the park within minutes of the tornado lifting. The Murfreesboro Fire Department had dispatched units as soon as the warning was issued. But the damage was so severe that roads were blocked by debris. The first responders had to approach on foot. They used chainsaws to cut through fallen trees. They searched each pile of debris systematically. Survivors were pulled from the wreckage. The injured were triaged in the parking lot of a nearby grocery store. Ambulances lined up to transport the most critical cases to St. Thomas Rutherford Hospital. The hospital activated its emergency operations plan. Staff were called in from their homes. The emergency room was overwhelmed but functional. The search and rescue operation continued into the night. By 10 p.m., all residents had been accounted for. The death toll remained at 2. The number of injured was updated to 121, with 12 of those in critical condition. The recovery effort moved from rescue to recovery. The next morning, the National Weather Service survey teams began their work. They walked the entire damage path, documenting the worst-hit areas. They used GPS to map the path. They measured the width of the damage. They estimated wind speeds based on the type of destruction they observed. The final survey concluded that the tornado was an EF4 on the enhanced Fujita scale, with maximum winds of 170 miles per hour. The path length was 17 miles. The maximum width was half a mile. What happened during those 25 minutes was a textbook example of a high-end tornado in the southeastern United States. But it also exposed a recurring problem: the vulnerability of mobile home residents to tornadoes. In the years following the Murfreesboro tornado, researchers at the University of Tennessee studied the risk factors. They found that in Rutherford County, over 20% of the housing stock was composed of mobile homes. Many of those homes were located in areas without nearby storm shelters. The cost of building community shelters was high and funding was limited. The state of Tennessee had a program to subsidize storm shelters, but the application process was slow. By 2009, only a handful of shelters had been built in the county. The mother and son who died that day were not the only victims of a systemic gap. Across the United States, mobile home residents account for a disproportionate number of tornado fatalities. According to data from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, approximately 45% of tornado deaths occur in mobile homes, even though mobile homes represent only about 6% of the housing stock. The risk is not proportional to the number of homes. It is proportional to the lack of protection. In the aftermath of the Murfreesboro tornado, local officials held a series of community meetings to discuss improvements. One proposal was to install personal weather radios in every mobile home in the county. Another was to increase the number of community shelters. Both proposals faced budget constraints. The cost of a weather radio was small, but distributing them to thousands of homes was not free. The cost of a single community shelter could exceed $100,000. The state allocated some funds, but not enough to cover all requests. The National Weather Service also reviewed its own performance. The warning lead time of 10 minutes was within the acceptable range. But the agency acknowledged that the warning could have been issued a few minutes earlier if they had relied more heavily on radar and less on spotter confirmation. The decision to wait for a spotter report was based on a desire to avoid false alarms. False alarms erode public trust, but in this case the delay may have cost lives. The question of how to balance accuracy and timeliness remains a subject of debate in the meteorological community. Beyond the technical details, the Murfreesboro tornado highlighted the human dimension of disaster. The community that was most affected was not wealthy. The Emerald Hills Estates was home to many low-income families, some of whom were struggling to make ends meet. The tornado destroyed their homes, their belongings, and their sense of security. The recovery was slow and uneven. Some families had insurance, others did not. Some were able to rebuild, others left the area permanently. The emotional trauma lingered for years. Children who survived the tornado later experienced nightmares and anxiety. Parents felt guilty for not being able to protect their families. In the years since 2009, the Murfreesboro tornado has been studied extensively. It has been cited in research papers on tornado risk communication, mobile home vulnerability, and the effectiveness of outdoor sirens. It has also been used as a case study in emergency management training. The lessons learned are not new, but they are reinforced. Tornado warnings must reach people in the most vulnerable structures. Community shelters must be built in areas where they are most needed. And the public must understand that a warning is only the first step. The second step is taking action. The tornado itself was a product of natural forces that we cannot control. The supercell that produced it formed because of a collision of air masses that will happen again and again in the springtime over the South. The next time the tornado may hit a school or a hospital, it may occur at night when people are asleep. It may be rain-wrapped and invisible until it is too late. The only defense is preparation, and preparation requires investment of money, of time, and of attention. As of 2009, the National Weather Service had been issuing tornado warnings for over a century. The technology had improved dramatically. Doppler radar, storm spotters, and satellite imagery had made it possible to detect tornadoes with greater accuracy than ever before. But the human element remained the weakest link. Warnings are only useful if people hear them, understand them, and act on them. In Murfreesboro, many people did hear the sirens. They did take shelter, they survived, but 2 people did not. Their story is a reminder that even with all the technology and all the warnings, the margin between life and death can be measured in seconds. At 10:45 a.m. on April 10, 2009, the National Weather Service in Nashville received a report of a funnel cloud near the town of Norn, about 10 miles north of Murfreesboro. The report came from a trained storm spotter who had been watching the developing supercell for nearly 20 minutes. The spotter described a low-hanging wall cloud with rapid rotation. He said the funnel appeared to be tightening. The meteorologist on duty logged the report and considered issuing a tornado warning immediately. The radar signature was already showing strong rotation aloft, but the decision was to wait for confirmation of a tornado on the ground. That decision added 2 minutes to the warning timeline. At 10:47, the same spotter reported a tornado on the ground. The warning was issued at 10:48. By that time, the tornado had already crossed Interstate 24 and was moving toward the eastern edge of Murfreesboro. What happened in those 2 minutes is critical. The tornado was not a subtle event. It was rain-wrapped, but the rotation was evident. The radar showed a debris ball, a signature of debris lofted into the air at 10:46. The National Weather Service survey team later determined that the debris signature was clear. The meteorologist admitted in the post-event analysis that they could have issued the warning 1 to 2 minutes earlier based on radar alone. But the culture of the office valued spotter confirmation to reduce false alarms. That culture had been reinforced after a series of false alarms in the region during the previous years. The public had complained. The media had questioned the accuracy of warnings. So the office erred on the side of caution. The result was a warning that reached some residents but not all. At 10:49, the tornado crossed the southern edge of the Emerald Hills Estates. The first home to be hit was a single-wide mobile home at Lot Fortwo. The resident 67-year-old Richard Holt had heard the sirens and was lying in the bathtub. The bathtub was not anchored to the floor. When the roof lifted, the bathtub shifted. Holt was thrown against the wall. He suffered a broken arm and a collapsed lung. He survived. 3 lots away, the mobile home belonging to Tina Holloway and her son Marcus was struck directly. The home was lifted off its foundation and disintegrated. The bodies were found in a field 300 feet away. The official time of death was estimated at 10:50. 1 minute later, the tornado entered the northern portion of the park and struck a cluster of 6 mobile homes that had been placed closest to an open field. None of those homes had tie-downs. One was a double-wide that had been retrofitted with plywood sheathing over the windows. That home was rolled onto its side. The occupants, a family of 4, survived by huddling in the interior hallway. The father later told reporters that they had heard the warning on a portable radio. They had about 5 minutes to prepare. The mother grabbed the children and a flashlight. They did not have a weather radio. They did not have a safe room. They were lucky. By 10:52, the tornado had left the mobile home park and was moving across open fields toward the Blackman community. The damage in Blackman was less severe but still significant. Several site-built homes lost their roofs. A 2-story brick home was shifted off its foundation. The tornado then crossed Highway 99 and entered a subdivision called Deer Lake Estates. There, the tornado clipped the corner of a new construction home under development. The framing was not yet stabilized. The wind destroyed the structure completely. The builder later estimated the loss at $250,000. The tornado continued northeast for another 5 miles before lifting at 11:05. The total path length was 17 miles. The width varied from 200 yards to half a mile. The maximum damage was concentrated in the mobile home park and in a 1-mile stretch east of the park. Emergency responders arrived at the park at 10:58. The Murfreesboro Fire Department had dispatched units within seconds of the warning, but the roads were impassable. Fallen trees, power lines, and debris blocked every entrance. The first responders abandoned their trucks and moved on foot. They used chainsaws and axes to cut through the wreckage. The triage area was set up in the parking lot of a nearby gas station. Paramedics used color-coded tags to prioritize the injured. Red tags meant critical, yellow tags meant serious, green tags meant minor, black tags meant deceased. By 11:30, 2 people had been pronounced dead. The paramedics covered them with sheets. The medical examiner arrived at noon. The hospital response was swift. St. Thomas Rutherford Hospital activated its emergency operations plan at 10:55 before the first patients arrived. The emergency room was cleared of non-critical patients. Staff were called in from home. The hospital's disaster supply cache was opened. At 11:15, the first wave of patients arrived by ambulance and private vehicle. Some were walking, others were on stretchers. The emergency room staff treated fractures, lacerations, and head trauma. One patient had a piece of wood lodged in his thigh. Another had a collapsed lung. The most critical patient was a 60-year-old man who had been thrown from his mobile home and hit by a piece of roofing metal. He underwent emergency surgery and survived. By 2 p.m., the search and rescue operation was nearly complete. The Red Cross had set up a shelter at a local church. The Salvation Army provided meals and water. Volunteers arrived with clothes and blankets. The American Red Cross Disaster Mental Health Team was deployed. They counseled survivors who were in shock. Many residents had lost everything. Their homes were gone, their cars were destroyed. Their identification was gone. They had no money, no phone, no place to go. The shelter housed 40 people that night. The next morning, the number dropped to 15 as families moved in with relatives. The National Weather Service survey team arrived at dawn the next day. They walked the entire damage path. They measured the debris field. They interviewed witnesses. They used GPS and photography to document every structure. The team leader, a meteorologist with 20 years of experience, noted that the damage in the mobile home park was consistent with EF3 to EF4 winds. But he also noted that the construction quality of the homes made it difficult to precisely estimate wind speed. Mobile homes are not built to withstand tornadoes. Even lower-end EF2 winds can destroy them. The team estimated the maximum winds at 170 miles per hour based on the damage to a few site-built homes east of the park. One home had been completely leveled. The only recognizable feature was the concrete slab. The anchor bolts had sheared off. That home was assessed as EF4 damage. The survey team also examined the damage to a metal truss tower that carried high-voltage power lines. The tower was twisted and collapsed. The National Weather Service used this as an additional data point. They concluded that the tornado had reached peak intensity at approximately 10:50 a.m., just as it was crossing the mobile home park. The pressure drop inside the tornado might have been significant enough to cause explosive failure of the mobile homes. The foundation anchors were insufficient. The roofs were not tied to the walls. The walls were not tied to the floor. The tornado essentially lifted the homes off their moorings and broke them apart. In the days after the tornado, the Federal Emergency Management Agency sent a preliminary damage assessment team. They estimated total property damage at $35 million. That included $25 million in residential damage and $10 million in infrastructure damage. Most of the residential damage was concentrated in the mobile home park. The park had over 300 homes. Nearly 200 were destroyed or damaged beyond repair. The remaining homes had minor damage. The park remained closed for 6 months while debris was removed and utilities were restored. The survivors faced a long recovery. Many had no insurance. Mobile home insurance is expensive and often not required by lenders. Some residents had renters insurance, but it was minimal. The state of Tennessee provided disaster assistance through the Tennessee Emergency Management Agency, but the funds were limited. The maximum amount a household could receive was $10,000. That was not enough to replace a mobile home, which cost between $30,000 and $70,000. Several families used the money for temporary housing. Others used it to pay for funeral expenses. The mother and son who died that day were buried in a private ceremony. The community raised money for the funeral through a local church. The mother's sister later said that the family had no storm shelter, no weather radio, and no plan. They had lived in the park for 3 years. They had never experienced a tornado. They did not know what to do when the sirens sounded. The sister said that if they had known, they might have driven to a nearby store or a community center, but they stayed home. The Murfreesboro tornado also raised questions about the outdoor warning siren system. The sirens in Rutherford County were designed to be heard outdoors. They were not intended to wake people up at night or to penetrate the interior of mobile homes. The sirens in the Emerald Hills estates were located at the entrance of the park. Residents at the far end of the park reported that they could barely hear them. Some said they heard nothing. The National Weather Service later recommended that mobile home parks install indoor alert systems or weather radios. But the recommendation was not mandatory. The cost was left to the park owners, who had no legal obligation to provide safety equipment. In the years since 2009, some progress has been made. The state of Tennessee expanded its storm shelter rebate program. By 2012, over 500 shelters had been installed in mobile home parks across the state. Rutherford County installed additional weather radios in community centers and public libraries. The National Weather Service improved its radar algorithms to detect debris signatures earlier. The lead time for tornado warnings in Middle Tennessee increased to an average of 15 minutes by 2005, but the underlying vulnerability remains. Mobile home residents are still at extreme risk. The death rate in mobile homes during tornadoes has not changed significantly. The problem is not technology. The problem is housing policy. The 2009 Murfreesboro tornado is also notable for what it revealed about the behavior of people in mobile homes during warnings. Researchers at the University of Tennessee surveyed survivors in the months after the tornado. They found that fewer than half of the residents had taken shelter in a building other than their home. Many did not know where to go. Some drove away from the tornado, but driving in a tornado is dangerous. One resident drove into a ditch and survived. Another drove into the path of the tornado and was killed. The researchers concluded that the most effective intervention was to provide community storm shelters within walking distance of mobile home parks. The cost of building a single shelter could be justified by the lives saved. The tornado also had a psychological impact on the first responders. Firefighters, paramedics, and police officers described the scene as the worst they had ever seen. One firefighter later said that he could not sleep for weeks. Another resigned from the department due to post-traumatic stress. The city of Murfreesboro established a peer support program for first responders. The program became a model for other cities in Tennessee. The meteorological investigation into the tornado revealed that it was a classic cyclic supercell. The storm produced at least 3 other tornadoes that day, though none were as strong. The parent storm began developing around 9:30 a.m. over western Tennessee. It moved east at 50 miles per hour. The environment was highly favorable for tornadoes: high humidity, strong wind shear, and a lifting mechanism from a cold front. The storm developed a mesocyclone around 10 a.m. The first funnel was reported at 10:30. The tornado itself touched down at 10:35 and lasted 25 minutes. The last unanswered question from the Murfreesboro tornado is whether the death toll could have been 0. If the warning had been issued 2 minutes earlier, would Tina Holloway and her son have had time to reach a safer location? If the mobile home park had a community shelter, would they have gone there? If the sirens had been louder, would they have heard them? The answers are impossible to know, but the questions persist. They are asked after every tornado that kills people in mobile homes. They will be asked again. The only way to stop asking is to change the conditions that lead to the same outcome year after year, spring after spring. The questions asked in Murfreesboro did not fade. They appeared again in Joplin in 2011, where 158 people died. They appeared in Moore, Oklahoma in 2013, where 24 people died. They appeared in Rolling Fork, Mississippi in 2023, where 26 people died. In each of these disasters, a significant portion of the victims were found in mobile homes or poorly constructed houses. The pattern repeated itself because the underlying conditions had not changed. The same vulnerabilities existed, the same gaps in warnings, shelter, and building codes. By 2012, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration had published a study on mobile home fatalities. The study examined over 3,000 tornado deaths dating back to 1950. It found that mobile home residents accounted for roughly 40% of all tornado deaths, even though mobile homes made up less than 10% of the nation's housing stock. The number was not random. It reflected a structural inequality in who could afford safe housing. Mobile homes cost less than site-built homes, but they also offered less protection. The study recommended that mobile home parks be required to provide community storm shelters, but the recommendation was not enforced. The mobile home industry argued that shelters were too expensive and that residents could simply go to public buildings. The argument ignored the reality that many residents had no transportation and limited mobility. In Murfreesboro, the Emerald Hills Estates Park eventually closed. The land was sold to a developer who built a shopping center. The survivors scattered. Some moved to other mobile home parks in the area. Others left Rutherford County entirely. The community that existed on that April morning was gone. A memorial was placed near the entrance of the old park, but it was removed when the shopping center was built. There is no permanent marker for the two people who died there. The mother and son are buried in a cemetery on the south side of Murfreesboro. Their grave is a flat stone with names, dates, and the words "In the Arms of the Angels." The meteorological community continued to study the storm. Researchers at the University of Alabama in Huntsville published a paper in 2013 that analyzed the radar data from the Murfreesboro tornado. They found that the tornado produced a debris signature that was visible on radar for a full 8 minutes before it reached the mobile home park. The debris signature appeared as a distinct area of high reflectivity and low correlation coefficient. The National Weather Service had not yet incorporated debris detection algorithms into its warning system at that time. If they had, the lead time might have been longer, but the science was still developing. In 2012, the National Weather Service upgraded its radar network with dual polarization technology. This new radar could distinguish between rain, hail, and debris. The first time a debris signature was detected in real time was during the 2013 Moore tornado. The warning lead time increased from an average of 14 minutes to 20 minutes. By 2015, every WSR Rate 8D radar in the United States had been upgraded. But the technology was only useful if people received the warning and took action. In Murfreesboro, the warning was issued 12 minutes before the tornado hit the mobile home park. That was enough time to drive to a concrete building less than half a mile away. Tina Holloway did not have a car that day. Her sister later said that the car was in the shop. The mother and son had no way to reach the store or the community center. The question of mobile home park safety was taken up by the Tennessee legislature in 2010. A bill was introduced that would require all mobile home parks with more than 50 units to have a community storm shelter. The bill failed. The Mobile Home Park Owners Association lobbied against it, arguing that the cost would put small parks out of business. A revised bill was introduced in 2012 requiring shelters only for new parks. That bill also failed. The issue died in committee. No state law in Tennessee requires a mobile home park to provide a storm shelter. The only requirements come from local ordinances. Rutherford County passed an ordinance in 2014 that requires new mobile home parks to offer a shelter. But the ordinance only applies to parks built after 2004. The existing parks, including the ones where most residents live, are exempt. The federal government also failed to act. The Federal Emergency Management Agency had a hazard mitigation grant program that could fund shelters, but the program required a local match. Many small counties could not afford the match. The Disaster Relief Act of 2020 included money for storm shelters in manufactured housing communities, but the funding was a one-time allocation. It covered only a fraction of the need. By 2023, the National Institute of Building Sciences estimated that the United States needed over 50,000 community storm shelters in mobile home parks. Only about 3,000 had been built. The human cost of this inaction is measured in lives. A 2018 study by researchers at Texas Tech University modeled the effect of universal shelter coverage in mobile home parks. They found that if every mobile home park in Tornado Alley had a community shelter within a 5-minute walk, the annual tornado fatality rate would drop by 60%. The study calculated that the cost per life saved was roughly $200,000. That is considered cost-effective by federal standards, but the money has not been appropriated. In Murfreesboro, the local school district built 2 new storm shelters after the tornado. The shelters were funded by a federal grant and state matching funds. They were designed to double as gymnasiums. The shelters can hold up to 500 people each. They are open to the public during tornado warnings, but they are located next to schools, not near mobile home parks. The closest shelter to Emerald Hills Estates was a church that had no basement. The church was damaged in the tornado. The survivors of the 2009 tornado have become advocates. A woman who lost her sister in the park testified before the Tennessee General Assembly in 2009. She described the sound of the wind, the darkness, and the silence afterward. She said that her sister's body was found in a field 200 yards from where the mobile home had been. The home was gone. There was no foundation. There was no anchor. The tornado had lifted the entire structure, thrown it into a pond, and disassembled it piece by piece. The sister was holding her son. They were found together. The testimony did not change the law, but it did change the conversation. The National Weather Service began to partner with mobile home park owners to install weather radios. The radios were donated by a nonprofit organization called the Weather Radio Network. By 2015, over 2,000 weather radios had been distributed in Tennessee mobile home parks. The radios were programmed to receive warnings for the specific county. They had loud alarms and flashing lights, but they only worked if residents had power and if they were home to hear them. On April 10, 2009, Tina Holloway had no weather radio. She had no television. She had no cell phone that would have received a wireless emergency alert. The wireless emergency alert system did not exist in 2009. It was launched in 2010. The mother and son died before the technology that might have saved them was in place. That timing is a cruel detail. The tornado that killed them was a warning in itself. It was a signal that the system was broken. But the system is slow to change. The National Weather Service updated its tornado warning criteria in 2014. It began issuing warnings based on radar-detected rotation rather than visual confirmation. This decreased the lead time in some cases but increased accuracy. By 2017, the average lead time for tornado warnings was 14 minutes, but lead time is meaningless if the warning does not reach the people who need it most. In 2020, a study by the University of Oklahoma examined the barriers to mobile home residents taking shelter. The study interviewed residents in 5 states. It found that the most common reason for not seeking shelter was a lack of transportation. The second most common reason was a lack of knowledge about where to go. The third reason was a belief that they were safe in their home. The residents had normalized the risk. They had lived in mobile homes for years without incident. They had experienced tornado warnings before and nothing had happened. The risk was abstract. The residents felt that they could not afford to leave their home every time a warning was issued. They would lose time, money, or belongings. The cost of safety was too high. The same pattern was observed in Murfreesboro. Residents of Emerald Hills Estates had heard tornado warnings before. Some had taken shelter at a nearby gas station. Others had stayed home. On April 10, 2009, the warning was issued at 10:38 a.m. The tornado struck at 10:50. That gave 12 minutes, but many residents did not act until it was too late. The sirens sounded at 10:45. By then, the tornado was already visible. The tornado was moving at 50 miles per hour. It crossed the park in less than 2 minutes. The warning time was adequate for people who were prepared. It was not adequate for people who were not. The meteorological investigation into the storm also examined the possibility of a precursor warning. The National Weather Service had issued a severe thunderstorm warning at 10:23 a.m. That warning mentioned the possibility of tornadoes. But a severe thunderstorm warning is not a tornado warning. The language is different. The public may not understand the difference. The study found that many residents did not know that a severe thunderstorm warning could precede a tornado. They saw the warning and did nothing because they thought it was just a thunderstorm. The confusion was not unique to Murfreesboro. It is a national problem. In 2012, the National Weather Service began using a new format for warnings. The new format included a list of impacts. It said things like, "This is a dangerous storm. It will produce damaging winds, large hail, and tornadoes." The goal was to make the language more urgent. Research showed that people were more likely to take shelter if the warning used words like catastrophic or life-threatening. The National Weather Service adopted those terms in 2014. But the change came 5 years after the Murfreesboro tornado. The tornado also exposed the weakness of the outdoor siren system. The sirens in Rutherford County were designed to be heard from outside. They were not designed to wake people up at night. The Murfreesboro tornado occurred at 10:50 a.m. Most people were awake, but the sirens were not loud enough inside mobile homes. The walls were thin. The windows were single pane. The wind noise was 80 decibels. The siren was 60 decibels at the far end of the park. Many residents reported hearing nothing. The National Weather Service issued a report on the effectiveness of outdoor sirens in 2010. The report recommended that sirens be used only as a supplement to other warning methods. It stated that sirens were not reliable for people who were indoors, asleep, or hearing impaired. The report also noted that sirens were often not audible when the wind was strong or when the power was out. The solution was to provide weather radios and cell phone alerts, but the cell phone alert system did not exist in 2009. And weather radios were not widely available. In the years since the tornado, the wireless emergency alert system has become the primary way that people receive warnings, but it has its own problems. The alerts are sent to all phones in a geographic area. They can be triggered by a tornado warning, but the location accuracy of cell tower triangulation is limited. People may receive warnings for a county that is not affected. Over time, this can lead to alert fatigue. People ignore the alerts because they are too common. The same problem occurred with the sirens. The tornado also had a lasting effect on the meteorologists who issued the warning. The forecaster on duty at the Nashville National Weather Service office later said that he thought about the Murfreesboro tornado every day. He said that he could see the radar signature forming. He knew it was a tornado. He issued the warning as soon as he could, but he still felt that he should have seen it earlier. The science of tornado formation was not yet advanced enough to detect the subtle precursors. The forecaster retired in 2005. He said that the Murfreesboro tornado was the worst event of his career. The storm itself was a textbook supercell. It developed in an environment that meteorologists call a hatched area on the Storm Prediction Center Outlook. The outlook was issued at 8 a.m. on April 10, 2009. It said that there was a high risk of severe thunderstorms and tornadoes across Middle Tennessee. The high-risk outlook is rare. It is issued only when conditions are favorable for a significant tornado outbreak. The forecasters knew that the day would be dangerous. They had predicted the outbreak 2 days in advance. The public was alerted through the media. But the specific location and timing of the tornado could not be predicted until the storm formed. The tornado that hit Murfreesboro was not the only one that day. The same supercell produced a series of tornadoes across northern Alabama and southern Kentucky. One of those tornadoes killed 5 people in a mobile home park near Huntsville. That park also had no community shelter. The survivors filed a lawsuit against the park owner, arguing that the owner had a duty to provide safe housing. The case went to the Alabama Supreme Court. The court ruled that mobile home park owners were not required to provide storm shelters. The decision set a legal precedent. It meant that mobile home residents were responsible for their own safety even though they lived in a structure that was inherently unsafe. The pattern of legal decisions has discouraged any change. Mobile home park owners have no incentive to build shelters. The residents have no power to demand them. The government has not mandated them. The result is that the risk is shouldered entirely by the people who can least afford it. In Murfreesboro, the 2 victims were a single mother and her child. They had no savings. They had no insurance. They had no transportation. They were the most vulnerable members of society. And when the tornado came, the system failed them. The National Weather Service has tried to address the problem through outreach. It created a program called Weather Ready Nation that trains local officials and community leaders on how to respond to severe weather. The program includes a curriculum for mobile home park residents. It teaches them to identify a safe location ahead of time. It tells them to never stay in a mobile home during a tornado. It advises them to go to a community shelter, a nearby business, or a friend's house. But the program relies on voluntary participation. Many park owners do not want to invite the National Weather Service onto their property. They fear liability. They fear that residents will demand changes. The story of the Murfreesboro tornado is not just about a storm. It is about a society that allows its most vulnerable members to live in structures that can be destroyed in seconds. It is about a warning system that works for some people but not for others. It is about a slow-moving bureaucracy that takes years to implement changes that could save lives. The tornado was a natural disaster, but the death toll was not purely natural. It was the product of human decisions about where to live, how to build, and what to protect. In the years since 2009, the National Weather Service has reduced the average number of tornado deaths per year, but the reduction has been uneven. Tornado deaths have decreased in site-built homes. They have not decreased in mobile homes. The reason is that site-built homes can be retrofitted with safe rooms and reinforced roofs. Mobile homes cannot. The only solution for mobile home residents is to leave the structure, and leaving requires a destination. The destination for the residents of Emerald Hills Estates was not available. There was no community shelter. There was no safe building within walking distance. The church was too far. The store was too far. The residents were trapped by geography and poverty. When the warning came, they had no choice but to stay. Some of them survived by pure luck. They were thrown from their homes but not killed. Others were not so lucky. The mother and son died because they had no other place to be. The tornado that struck Murfreesboro on April 10, 2009 remains a case study in the intersection of meteorology and social justice. It is a reminder that the science of prediction is only half the battle. The other half is the infrastructure of response. Without safe places to go, warnings are just words. Without transportation, safe places are unreachable. Without awareness, transportation is irrelevant. The chain is broken at multiple links. The Murfreesboro tornado exposed every link. The community that was torn apart is still rebuilding. The survivors have moved on. The memorial is gone, but the lesson remains. Every spring the storms return. Every spring the warnings are issued. And every spring someone is caught in a mobile home waiting for a siren that they cannot hear, hoping for a safe place that does not exist. The question is not whether the next tornado will come. It is whether we will be ready, and the answer for now is the same as it was in 2009. No. At 4:37 p.m. on April 10, 2009, the National Weather Service Storm Survey Team stepped out of their vehicle at the intersection of Bradyville Pike and Sulphur Springs Road. The sky was still gray. The air smelled of mud and splintered pine. What they saw was a path of complete destruction that stretched for nearly a mile and a half. The tornado had carved a scar through the landscape that was visible from satellite imagery. The team measured the width of the damage at 300 yards. They rated the intensity at EF4 based on the total destruction of well-built homes and the scouring of asphalt from the road surface. The wind speeds were estimated at 170 miles per hour, but the survey team also found something else. The debris field was concentrated. Most of the debris had fallen within a few hundred yards of the original structures. That suggested the tornado was not only violent but also compact. It had a narrow, intense core that moved quickly. That explained why some homes were completely gone while others just 50 feet away had only minor damage. The residents who survived often had no idea that a tornado had passed within yards of their house. What happened in the 20 minutes before the tornado formed is still studied in meteorology classrooms. The supercell developed along a dry line that stretched from western Tennessee into northern Alabama. The dry line separated warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico from hot, dry air coming off the plains. The boundary was sharp. The wind shear was extreme. Wind speeds changed rapidly with height. That created a rotating updraft. The Storm Prediction Center had issued a tornado watch for the area at 2:45 p.m. The watch stated that a few tornadoes were possible, with the potential for strong, long-track events. The National Weather Service in Nashville began issuing severe thunderstorm warnings for the same cell at 3:10 p.m. The first warning mentioned large hail and damaging winds. At 3:25 p.m., the forecaster noticed a hook echo on the radar. The hook echo is a classic signature of a mesocyclone. It indicates that the storm is rotating and that a tornado may be forming. The forecaster issued a tornado warning at 3:28 p.m. The warning covered Rutherford County, including the city of Murfreesboro. But the warning was issued only 3 minutes before the tornado touched down, and it was not until 3:31 p.m. that the tornado was confirmed by a spotter on the ground. By that time, the tornado was already on the ground and moving through Emerald Hills Estates. The warning arrived too late for the residents who had no weather radio and could not hear the sirens. The forecaster later described the radar data in detail. The storm had been producing large hail for nearly 30 minutes before the tornado formed. That is common. The hail core can mask the tornado signature on radar because the hail returns a strong signal that overwhelms the weaker return from debris. The forecaster had to wait for the hook echo to become visible. That took time. In 2009, the radar technology was WSR Rate 8D, which scanned the atmosphere at a rate of 1 volume scan every 4 to 6 minutes. That means the radar could miss a tornado that formed and dissipated between scans. The Murfreesboro tornado formed rapidly between 2 radar scans. The forecaster saw the hook echo on the next scan and issued the warning immediately, but the delay of a few minutes was fatal. If the radar had been scanning more frequently, the warning might have been issued 5 minutes earlier. That would have given the residents of Emerald Hills Estates enough time to reach the church or the convenience store, but the radar was not designed for rapid updates. It was designed for broad coverage. The spatial resolution was also coarse. The radar beam at that distance was about 1 mile wide. It could not resolve the small-scale rotation that preceded the tornado. The forecaster was working with incomplete information. Investigators later compared the radar data from that day with higher resolution data from a research radar that was operating nearby. The research radar had a beam width of 200 yards and a scan rate of 1 minute. It detected the tornado's precursor rotation nearly 8 minutes before the tornado touched down. The difference between the two radars was the difference between a warning and no warning. The National Weather Service began upgrading its radar network to dual polarization technology in 2010, but that upgrade did not improve scan speed. It improved the ability to distinguish between rain, hail, and debris. The scan speed remained at 4 to 6 minutes. It was not until 2013 that the National Weather Service began implementing a new scanning strategy called Supplemental Adaptive Intravolume Low-Level Scan, or SAILS. SAILS allowed the radar to scan the lowest levels of the atmosphere more frequently during severe storms. That reduced the time between updates to about 2 minutes, but that change came too late for Murfreesboro. The technology that could have saved lives was not available when it was needed most. The human cost of that technological gap is measured in more than minutes. It is measured in the lives of Brenda Adams and her son Michael, who were found together in the debris of their home. It is measured in the 32 injuries that occurred in the park. It is measured in the trauma that followed every survivor. The tornado struck on a Friday afternoon. Many residents were home from work. Some were preparing for the weekend. Others were watching the sky. The sky had turned a sickly green. The clouds were rotating slowly. Several residents later said they saw a funnel form and then drop from the cloud base. By the time they saw it, it was too late to run. The aftermath of the Murfreesboro tornado prompted a series of changes at the local level. Rutherford County installed new sirens that were designed to be louder and more directional. The county also began a public education campaign that encouraged residents to purchase weather radios and to sign up for the newly created reverse nine-onion system. But the county did not fund a community shelter for Emerald Hills Estates. The cost was estimated at $300,000. The county argued that it did not have the money. The state of Tennessee did not provide grants for shelters in mobile home parks. The federal government did not mandate them. The residents were left to fend for themselves. Some families moved out of the park after the tornado. Others stayed because they had nowhere else to go. The park was rebuilt. New mobile homes were installed. The trees grew back. By 2012, the park looked almost the same as it did before the storm, except for a small memorial near the entrance. The memorial was a single bench with a plaque that read, "In memory of Brenda and Michael Adams." The bench was removed in 2015 during a renovation. No one knew where it went. The story of the Murfreesboro tornado is not finished. It continues every time a tornado warning is issued for a mobile home park. It continues every time a forecaster watches a hook echo form on the radar and wonders if the warning will arrive in time. It continues every time a resident hears the siren and stays inside because they have no safe place to go. The tornado of April 10, 2009 was not an anomaly, it was a pattern. The pattern repeats across the United States every spring. The same questions are asked, the same answers are given, the same failures are accepted. The technology improves. The forecasting gets better, the warnings get faster, but the gap between the warning and the safe place remains. That gap is not a problem of science. It is a problem of will, and until that will is found, the answer to the question of whether we are ready will remain the same. No.